All right, so we're going to start out just reviewing some of the differences between the North and the South that you guys read about a few weeks. And then we're going to get into cotton and why and how it became so important, not just in the American South, but in the North and internationally as well. You guys have this PowerPoint in Google Classroom, so you can go back to this slide here that has a link for you to how to open the notes sheet in Notability, how to then submit it back through Google Classroom. So if at any point during this you need to stop to take notes, which you should, just go ahead and pause the video. Or like I said, you do have a copy of this slideshow in Google Classroom. So we're going to start off just with the objectives that we want to get through in this lesson. We're going to just review the major differences in economy, social structure, etc. between the North and the South prior to the Civil War. This time period in the South is known as the antebellum period in the South. We're going to explain why cotton was so key to the North and South and describe how the actual growing of cotton shaped the Southern economy and social structure, which includes the increased use of enslaved workers in the American South at the time. All right, so let's go. You should have your notes in front of you, the notes sheet that I had in Google Classroom for you. Either have it in Notability or you can have opened it printed it, whichever way works best for you is just fine. And you're going to start off just by writing this vocabulary. So you can either go ahead and pause now to write that vocabulary, or you can go back to the presentation. It's up to you. The word here that I do want to talk a little bit about is sectionalism, because a lot of what we are talking about in the next couple of weeks in the lead up to the Civil War has to do with sectionalism, which was this idea that people in the North felt like they were Northerners. People in the South felt like they were Southerners. They didn't necessarily feel like they were Americans. They would have put their identity as a Southerner or as a Northerner before their identity as Americans. And that's something to keep in mind as we go through these next few weeks. So the Industrial Revolution was when the United States switched from using mostly handmade goods into using machines. And this had a really profound impact both in the North and in the South. It meant things could be produced much, much faster. It also meant that a lot of people had to get new jobs in different areas because their jobs were no longer applicable as they had been before. So in the North, this really turned the Northern economy into a manufacturing economy. The economy was based on factories, on producing goods, on changing raw materials into usable goods. And one group of people, the owners, became super, super, super rich during this time of production. But it impacted the South too, because a lot of the machinery that was invented made farming much more faster and more efficient. Specifically, what we're going to be looking at the next week or so, the cotton gin. The Industrial Revolution also impacted transportation, which made moving goods from the North to the South or within the North and the South much more efficient and happen more quickly as well. So these differences you read about, a lot of these differences are rooted in the fact that the geography of the North and South are super different. So the climate of the North is much more extreme. You go from extreme winters into hot, humid summers. Whereas in the South, it's a little bit more temperate, a little bit more warm to cool year-round. Also the weather. In the North, you might have big snowstorms, big rainstorms. The South, the climate is pretty much always humid and slightly rainy, which means that the soil in the South is much more suited to farming than the soil in the North. In the North, you had rocky soil. It wasn't as easy to plant things. But the Southern soil, climate, and weather were all perfect for agriculture, which meant that while the North was full of these cities that were kind of far apart, but were also very crowded, the South was more plantations, these big sprawling homes with big farms that were all very far apart from each other. We didn't have the same kinds of big cities in the South that we did in the North. So these were some of the differences between the North and the South. They're going to help lead to sectionalism. And they play a big role in why we see the South depending more on the work of enslaved workers than we see in the North. And that's not to say that people were not enslaved in the North. They were, but not nearly as much as in the South. And in fact, by the time we hit the Civil War, a lot of the North has made the institution of slavery illegal, whereas the South really believes that it's necessary to their economy, and they have no desire or intention of getting rid of the institution of slavery. This carries over into the admission of new states, which we saw when we were talking about Texas. The North only wanted to admit new states if they were considered to be free states. The South was only interested in introducing new states or admitting new states if they could bring their enslaved workers along with them when they went there. So go ahead and pause this and make sure you get all of this written down. The North and the South also depended on each other, though. I'm going to move this. Hold on just a second. It's a little better. Since the South was growing and the North was producing, the North needed the raw materials from the South to manufacture into things like cotton. And the South needed the Northern machinery and factories to buy their cotton and manufacture it into goods. And there was this quote that I found, and I wish I'd written down who said it, but I didn't. We purchase, and he's a Southern owner of a plantation. We purchase all our luxuries and necessities from the North. The slaveholder dresses in Northern goods, rides in a Northern saddle, sports his Northern carriage, reads Northern books. In Northern vessels, his products are carried to market. So they were very dependent on each other in this economy. The South grew the materials, the North manufactured them into usable goods. Neither one could be successful without the other. This was especially true with cotton. In the American South, cotton was everything. It was the basis of the economy. What role you played in its production determined your space in society. And for Southern whites who were owners of large plantations, cotton brought in enormous wealth and enormous wealth for the South overall. And we're going to get into this more in the next couple weeks. But one of the reasons why cotton made the South so wealthy wasn't just that it was one of the most desired commodities in the world, but that the South was using an unpaid labor force to do the majority of work to get cotton. So by using enslaved humans, they were taking advantage of a labor force that was not being paid. And so all of the money that was coming in after paying for seeds and machinery and the tools needed to grow the cotton was profit. And Eli Whitney, this gentleman you see over here on the right, invents something called the cotton gin in 1793. And this takes an already super profitable crop and makes it even more profitable. And that's what your reading is going to be about. I want you to look at these tables and maps, and on your notes sheet, there's a place to answer this question. But what two effects did the invention of the cotton gin have on the production of cotton? The one on the left shows just the production of cotton overall, places where it was being produced, and the table on the right looks at how many bales of cotton were produced per year. And a bale is about 400 to 500 pounds of cotton. So at this point, I am going to leave you to stop and open your reading. So open the reading, you're going to annotate it, make sure you're writing down main ideas, defining underlined words. There's a place at the top of your notes sheet to put those definitions. And write any questions, comments, or connections you can in the margins. Also make sure you're getting through all of those notes sheets. And then when you're done, you'll reopen the PowerPoint. If you didn't already open it, you'll open it for the first time. And you'll go through and slides 11, 12, and 13. You'll either look at the image like on slide 11, or slides 12 and 13, you will watch the videos and answer the questions.